There was a man who gave his life for this nation, a man who believed in the American dream and who spoke of his own interpretation of that dream in front of millions. The year was 1963, and that man was the Reverend Martin Luther King. His words are now, of course, immortal. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Thanks in part to his courageous leadership and eventual sacrifice, America truly became that unbigoted nation. But it was a long journey. As with so many other countries of the world, we were gravely tainted by the history of slavery, the inhuman abuse of our fellow man simply for economic gain. That exploitation was made even worse by the systematic intimidation and serial murders perpetrated by the Democrats who created, yes, the Democrats created the Ku Klux Klan to carry racism beyond the institution of slavery itself. Some Democrats, like Woodrow Wilson, would even rise to the highest office of the land and shamelessly and shockingly use the office of the president to glorify the sins of the Democrats and show heinous and outrageous movies such as The Birth of the Nation inside the White House itself. Such men had no shame. They represented the diametric opposite of what their rivals in the Republican Party represented. Men like Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president who faced down the evil of slavery to become the great emancipator and to bring us out of a civil war that finally put paid to that wicked institution of slavery forever. Other great men, such as the Reverend Martin Luther King, would build on Lincoln's Republican legacy with a civil rights movement that would become the envy of the free and the enslaved world. Seminal events such as the Selma Bridge March for Freedom would resonate around the world. Then, by the end of the Cold War, as the Berlin Wall fell, even the wisest of us believed that we were truly entering a new post-racial world where MLK's dream had become our national reality. But not so fast. Whilst communism may have collapsed in the captive nations of Eastern Europe, it found a new home in the West, even here in America. Marxist thinkers like Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Herbert Marcuse, and Jürgen Habermas, under the oh-so-innocuous-sounding Frankfurt School, refused to give up on Karl Marx and his communist dream. But how could they defeat America and her allies from the inside if the original class struggle had led to communism's defeat elsewhere? Easily, it seemed, for the diabolical genius of these men was to pit us against each other based upon our race and skin color, not our class, as Marx originally had. And that is exactly how we arrive at the target for this episode of the Gorka Reality Check, the pernicious and lethal ideology that is critical race theory and its generation of artificial racial divide where there is none. Who are America's neo-racists and what is CRT? Let us start our conversation with a man who has declared war on critical race theory and its purveyors in the Democrat Party. A good friend of my daily radio show, America First, a man I consider to be a great patriot as well as a friend. He is the new Lieutenant Governor of the great state of North Carolina. Mark Robinson, welcome to the Gorka Reality Check.
Good to be here again, as always, Sebastian. Thank you for having me.
Lieutenant Governor, you shot to fame based upon a viral video when you stood up at a local meeting in support of our Second Amendment rights, despite not being a gun owner yourself. Your spirit, your fight in the face of bureaucrats who are acting like dictators propelled you to the office you now hold, and it is a great, great success for North Carolina that you are where you are today. Explain to us why, in addition to protecting the Second Amendment and all your other duties, why you have recently declared political war on this theory that is called critical race theory.
Well, you know, the Second Amendment is part and parcel, of course, was part of our Constitution. And that's the reason why, you know, I spoke up for it so vehemently, was because it's such a critical part of that Constitution. But, you know, beyond that, when you look at the United States of America, all the things you just mentioned, the fact that this country has walked such a tough walk when it comes to the issue of racial harmony. You know, we've been through some terrible things in this country, and we've learned some terrible lessons. And gone through some terrible struggles in order to get to a place where we can eat together and worship together and play together and learn together and serve together, do all the wonderful things that we do together. To now want to institute a program that's going to take us backwards in time, that's going to divide us instead of bringing us closer together, or move us in reverse instead of moving us forward. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it really is something that's blowing my mind, and something I'm not going to be silent about, because we cannot allow the sacrifice of the past to be in vain. Let me say that again. We cannot allow the sacrifice of the past to be in vain. And when I say that, I mean all the people who laid down our lives to bring this nation together in racial harmony, to now have it be thrown away by leftists and Marxists who want to institute something like critical race theory. I'm not going to stand for it, and neither are the great patriots of this nation.
And to those people who are fomenting racial division right now, the founders of Black Lives Matter, the Antifa activists, the members of the Democrat Party, who are subscribing to critical race theory, who are saying it must be taught in our schools, it must be used in the US military, and this idea that if you are white, you are inherently racist, even if you're a child in kindergarten. What is your response to these people who are peddling CRT, Lieutenant Governor?
My response is this. Think about what happened in the past when other racists, and yes, I said other racists, drove programs like this. What kind of hatred and division it stoked. Think about that. Think about all the hatred and division, and yes, violence that this type of thought stoked in this nation. We cannot do this. If we allow children to be browbeat in schools and told that they're racist, even though that they're not, if we allow them to be told that they're less than, even though we know that they're not, it's going to create in those children, in some of those children, a great degree of them, a hatred, and it's going to, a lot of anger is going to grow in those children. That's not what we should be breeding. What we should be telling our children about is how we all struggled, how good people of all colors, of all religions, came together to defeat injustice in this country. That's the story that we should be telling our children, and that's the story that will bring them together, not drive them apart.
When you look at the black community in America, Mark, when you see the rates of fatherlessness, crime, incarceration, violence in cities like Chicago, what is your response to what has to be fixed? We see a community that, sadly, according to Candace Owens, is living in a new plantation. It's not a cotton field. It is a political plantation of the Democrat governors and mayors. How do we help the black community the most, Lieutenant Governor?
I think the way we do it is what we've seen in the past. We get out of the way and we allow those communities to thrive on their own. You know, limited government is something I'm a big proponent of. The solution does not lie with the government. If you look back through history, at times in our nation when there was severe racism, when there was this extreme bigotry set up, black communities were thriving. And why? Because they were relying on each other, and they were relying on conservative principles, principles of self-reliance, of self-responsibility. Those were the types of things that help those communities thrive. And those are going to be the types of things that are going to help those communities thrive again. I say it like this, people who survived the Middle Passage and survived plantations, survived the horrors of mechanized slavery and survived Jim Crow, we could survive what's going on now. And the way we did those things in the past, survive those things in the past, was to lean on each other and rely on good principles. We need to do that again in our communities to see some of these problems through.
And the role of faith, the role of Bible, church, and God?
Absolutely paramount. Absolutely paramount. We could not have walked this walk and come through all these struggles without relying on the Almighty. It is systemic throughout our communities, how we have relied on religion, how we've relied on God and been faithful towards Him, and He's been faithful toward us and helped us survive all these things. And not just survive, but thrive through these things. And so, of course, a returning to that religion that brought us through is a huge part of that.
Well, we will get through this as well. We will stop the new bigots if we have enough citizen politicians like Mark Robinson, the new Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, a man who is so dedicated to the truth. He joins us here on the Gorka Reality Check from his vacation in a hotel. God bless you, Mark Robinson. Keep doing what you do. This is the Gorka Reality Check. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.